Hello, family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I'm your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy world. Let's get dialed in. So, quick overview, the DNC we didn't see. What are the costs of elections, really? And what can we walk away with, re Kamala's stance on Israel and Palestine? So, I was furious because, as you last heard, the Obamas were fantastic, amongst other things. But because of the way scheduling worked out, and there'll be a time when we're just all up in the fray of the DNC and reporting every day, but I wasn't able to capture those last 2 days. And we don't necessarily need to, but I will just say, remember when Oprah turned up? Like, she might be the only billionaire I won't eat, okay? Like, I grew up with her. I'm upset about it. Her story means something to me. But I will fold to peer pressure. If you want me to hate Oprah, my fellow low revolutionaries, advocates, activists, artists, lefties, etc., I will do it. I will do it for us. All right. Number 2, I want to be really clear with what I'm about to say, right? Because I fully support this person getting the bag. I really do. But can we just be honest for just a minute that Amanda Gorman's poetry is terrible? Ooh, can we just say it? She's 26 now, so it's okay. I was like, development needs to happen. It's all good. But I'm like, girl, you got the bag a million times over. You have access to the best resources in the world. Like, I have nothing against the person. I just can't help it. I know it to be true. And I'm like, are we not saying it because she's black? Because that means I can. Like, I'm all here for her getting better, but low-key, Maya Angelou. Okay. That's too much. I slapped my hand for that one. Not upset at this person getting the bag, but I'm like, can we get some decent poetry? Just a little bit. Just like something that makes a little bit of sense. I get it. It's hard to write things like, what rhymes with democracy? Like, we can move on. Okay. But the middest of the mid for me was Kamala Harris's speech, right? And here's the thing. I have done a great deal of research on her growing up in America and in specifically in Berkeley, which you'll notice that she rarely ever mentions because it's this bastion of liberalism. And her job right now, I think, according to her administration, everything else is appealing to those, to people in Georgia, any other swing state, the Midwest, et cetera. But it was really interesting because she did participate and grow up in a desegregation program, and it did shape her life. I was reading about how friendships out of that, right? This is a school that willingly implemented desegregation at a time when the vast majority of schools in America were not. I was reading about how so many people from that time, right, are still friends 50 years later. That's incredibly meaningful. But I also heard stories that the older that these children got, the more that the disparity in their realities played a role, right? Caused tensions, the differences in class, the unexamined realities of race once we leave the school, different kinds of bullying, and how the teaching and educational staff wasn't always equipped to deal with this sudden new reality. Those things about Kamala Harris are important, and I'll tee them up later, but they shouldn't inform how we look at her as a president. And I think I'm seeing a little bit of confusion or uncertainty around that. The reality of her blackness does not exempt Kamala Harris from criticism, nor does it free her of the realities of anti-black racism and misogyny, or the coupling of those things called misogynoir, right? Everything is going to be playing a role in all of this. But the reason why I call her speech mid was for 2 points, right? 2 points. The rest was fine. Is she one of the most talented speech givers in the world? No. I do have a roster, yes. I've done a stupid amount of research on it. It's one of the weird things in my brain that I like to do. But it was specifically, right? For the record, I just put down, like, in stories, y'all know I struggle with social media hella, right? I'm just like, I don't want to, I'm so tired of light skins yapping, right? Unfortunately, I'm one of them. But I did put in my stories, like, that was mid. I didn't say what I was, but everybody knows what I was talking about. I got more than a few messages in my DMs being like, hard disagree, or I agree with you 98% of the time. I guess this is the 2%, and all these things. And I do appreciate it, and no shade to those folks. I'm encouraging of all the things here, but I just like there was a little tone in one or two of them, and I was just like, and I'm so behind in the DMs, I'm trying to catch up, but I was just like, I apologize if I don't think it's dope for somebody to brag about having the most lethal military force in the world. I apologize for that. I apologize if in hearing somebody say about Gaza that it's heartbreaking and devastating, but then undermining that by passionately declaring Israel's right to defend itself. From what at this point? From whom, right? That part was never mentioned. It's almost never mentioned when people say that Israel has a right to defend itself. Against what? The framing of Hamas now, right? I mean, we are so beyond the pale for Hamas being the rationale behind 40,000 people being murdered. And we rarely, when we talk about that point, and I challenge myself to do this weekend, it is harder to think about that is already an unimaginable thing to wrap one's head around. It's also incredibly difficult to think about the quality of life for those who survived, right? For those who were injured, the reality of malnourishment, starvation, unclean water, right? There's a slow kind of death. And we see that. We actually see that here in the United States when it comes to its treatment of like Black and Indigenous populations, having lead in the water and asbestos in the walls. But we've seen what that kind of willful neglect and abuse does. And, I've mentioned before that a ceasefire is enforced, not accepted. But it was imperative for me, and I dare say for many of you, to know exactly what Kamala Harris's stance was. I don't believe in miracles, right? I do not believe in miracles. I don't expect them, I should say. But that doesn't mean that that people haven't surprised me. People have surprised me all the time. It's partly why I do the work that I do. So many things can happen in a moment. But Kamala Harris transforming into a different entity, not so much, right? So, I'll say this. First, the Biden administration, and then Kamala Harris, they've co-opted the term ceasefire, which is fine because although we don't give ourselves credit enough, the call to action is now around an arms embargo. I'm going to get back to Kamala Harris in a moment and where she stands. But there's a question that I didn't get to ask because of the couple of days that went by with the DNC that I didn't cover here with you all. Where were the Palestinians? Where were the Palestinians? So like many of you may have been, I was following, right, the story, anxious to know, because there was a brief moment that it did seem like a Palestinian might get an actual chance to speak. There was a lot of back and forth, right? So the Uncommitted National Movement, right? This was an anti-war protest vote during the primaries, right? So it's an anti-war protest, but they urged the convention to include at least 2 Palestinian American speakers on the convention's main stage. One of them, I believe, is a House rep. And in learning that there was Israeli hostage families who were speaking, that was incredibly important. So I was following the story specifically around Muslim women and what this particular movement, though, of the uncommitted said. This is what they said. We are learning that Israeli hostage families will be speaking from the main stage. We strongly support that decision and also strongly hope that we will also be hearing from Palestinians who've endured the largest civilian death toll since 1948. So that's what they wrote. By Wednesday evening, it was very clear that the convention, and specifically Kamala Harris's team, from what I understand, rejected those requests. So in response, a group of those uncommitted delegates, they staged a sit-in in front of Chicago's United Center. Ilhan Omar joined the demonstration and AOC called in via FaceTime. Some people had criticism of that. So I'll say this, to uplift one voice while invalidating the other is unbelievably cruel. not only is it just reprehensible, it's an act of cruelty. So what happened as a result of that? Because of the convention's refusal to have a Palestinian American speaker, the group Muslim Women for Harris made the decision to disband. Right? They're withdrawing support for Harris. This is what they had to say about it. The family of the Israeli hostage that was on the stage tonight has shown more empathy towards Palestinian Americans and Palestinians than our candidate or the DNC has. Right? Here's the DNC we didn't get to see. So on Monday, right, the DNC did grant the Uncommitted Campaign space to hold a separate panel specifically focused on Gaza and Palestinian human rights. So according to some social media posts I was able to find and reports from it, hundreds attended and listened to the unbelievably horrible accounts from doctors who had been working in Gaza's destroyed hospitals, where a vast majority of the patients who arrived were maimed children, right? So one was Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan, she's a Palestinian American surgeon who treated patients in Gaza. She told the story of a little boy who had lost all of his family members and said he wished to die too because everybody he loved is now in heaven. You might ask yourself, because I'm about to mention somebody else, like why doctors? Oftentimes they're the only survivors. We know that some of them have also been killed. So Haj Hassan said that even the children who she had been able to successfully treat and discharge would leave the hospital only to face potential death because of bombings, starvation, and dehydration, right? Oh, there were, she said, alarming reports of the first confirmed cases of childhood polio in Gaza. Another panelist, Hala Hijazi, who described herself as a longtime and moderate Democrat. So this is how this person self-identifies, right? She'd worked as a party fundraiser, raised over $12 million in the past. So this is somebody who's very active in American politics. She said, "I'm here because my family is dead." She's lost over 100 family members in the current onslaught. Hijazi, Hijazi serves on the board of Reproductive Rights Political Action Committee. That's a mouthful. So NARAL, Pro-Choice California, that's what it's called. She told the audience that she fights for reproductive freedoms at home and then says, quote, "But I can't help the women in Gaza who are pregnant right now." It is so important to note that Harris's administration, or I should say campaign, it's not administration yet, and many folks who are Democrats treat Gaza and treat Palestine as a single issue thing. And what the left is becoming very adept at is understanding the ways in which our intersections and our experiences and our stories and also our resources and supports overline and overlap. But, in spending time to listen to the speeches that weren't allowed to be read on stage and paying attention to the other DNC, the one we didn't get to see, the message is so much of togetherness. It's unbelievable that the Harris campaign, or at least the DNC committee, decided that they wouldn't actually have it there. It would have meant so much more. It would have been so much more meaningful and powerful. It was such a beautiful offering. So what has happened since Kamala Harris accepted the nomination, right? So the administration, I want to be clear, yes, Biden is still technically in office, but the administration approved a $20 billion weapons sale to Israel without any conditions. That's what's happened since. So I think we can say that the Harris campaign will function almost precisely as towards Israel as Biden did. And as we think about what these next steps look like, because it was so important to know exactly what we're working with. I do think that they're going to be a little bit cleverer about how they go about things, but it's okay. And what I mean when I say it's okay is this was more or less expected, but we needed the confirmation. We needed to know. And I think we'll really know when Kamala Harris wins, as she's projected to later on, but it is so important to know exactly what we're working with because it does look different under her. And how do I know? The way that the fighting looks like right now. And I don't mean between the left as a collective against that, Biden's administration or Kamala's. I mean the infighting that's happening amongst us right now. the ways in which identity is being weaponized against each other, right? I was going to bring that up in depth, but I think it deserves its own episode. I'll just say this. I'm seeing a lot of black folks who are saying, I'm not owed, sorry, I'm hearing something and I don't know what I'm hearing. It's outside? Okay, yeah. There's a lot of black folks who are using weird anecdotes about the plane going down and having them needing to put the mask on for themselves first. And I'm just like, well, nobody survives a plane crash. Let's just be clear about that, mask or no mask. And then, and a lot of folks who are condemning black people who may or may not vote in the election. And the reason why they're doing, and it's a lot of Muslims, Palestinians, Arabic people who are saying, this is your fault. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, but we will get into it later. I felt compelled to raise it up. Actually, we might be able to get into today. But there's something else I want to talk about really quickly. It does deserve its own space. I'll just say this, actually. I don't want to skirt over it. You might hear that I'm slightly inarticulate at the moment. It's not just because I played a lot of basketball today. It's because I'm really upset. I'm upset and I'm angry and I'm disgusted. And it's not because I expected a miracle, as I mentioned, but I still hoped. And I think when I think about hope, I think about it the way that Angela Davis thinks about it. And so, like many of you, you might be disheartened in this moment and you might be disillusioned in this moment. And that's okay. But this has always been our fight. And we have been here before. And as much as I would love it if we could just make the bad thing stop, we can't. But that doesn't mean that we stop. That doesn't mean that we quit. This is a moment to regroup. This is a moment to think about what things need to look like now. This is a moment to look at all the ways in which we are being positioned against each other, because it's happening, and it's happening at an astronomical and dangerous rate. And this is the moment that we start some fucking badass, sick-ass 21st century organizing practices. That's what I'm here for, that move beyond simply critical mass, right? This is a moment of critical connections, not critical mass. And that is precisely why there is such a concerted effort to divide us in this moment, to cast rocks, to blame. And I know that I always sound like I've got an aluminum foil hat on my head when I'm just like, it's Russia and it's Iran. And I don't think it is this time necessarily, but it's not, because so many of these arguments are about bots or rage baiters and race baiters. One person who came out and did this whole teary-eyed thing, turns out that she's a whole racist who hates black people who happens to be Palestinian. That is not by any stretch of the imagination an indication of any Palestinian person. But we're going to see more and more weaponizations against identity. For the record, though, this is so random, but you know how I know trans just isn't in anymore? There wasn't one trans speaker either, and nobody was like, "Whoa!" And I'm okay with that. Like, this isn't like, for anyone who's like, this is just, it was about getting everybody up, and it's not, because I've heard that, like, well, they couldn't get everybody up there. They low-key did. Like, they got every kind of person up there, except for a trans person, which I don't care about. Where trans people are like, we got our fight, whatever. But what was most important was getting a Palestinian voice up there, and they didn't. They didn't. So, I did want to bring up this thing because I felt some kind of way about it. So I watched the end of it, and there was thousands of balloons that dropped from that sling. Thousands of balloons and confetti. And I was like, oh, you got balloons money? Like, you got balloon and confetti money out here? While our fucking public education system is literally crumbling at our fingertips, and people's is hungry, and nignogs like me, right, are out here scraping to make sure that our political dreams and freedoms actually remain intact. You got balloon money? I was very upset. And so I started to do some research. How much does it cost to actually be in the convention? Because we talk about big money in politics. My little matzo ball Bernie Sanders brought it up. But like, what was that about? What was it? Okay, so if you were watching the DNC, you know that the arena was packed with people. But you also saw, because it was an arena, You saw it was full, like, the rows and rows and rows of boxes and sweets. Do you know that the starting price for one of those was $500,000? That some of them, the majority of them, were $1 to $2 million. So when we saw our favorite streamers, perhaps, or this or that, the world's biggest broadcasters, it's almost ironic to name the need for antitrust laws while the literal people who spend buco dollars to ensure that they aren't seen through have the best seats in the House. That's kind of weird to me, kind of random and wild, but that's what we're dealing with. So I was like, let me just go down what do elections cost? What do they actually cost, right? So right now, data is still being collected during this whole campaign, but I was like, let me look back to 2020. So Democratic candidates spent a total of roughly $3.16 trillion US dollars. That was more than any other election. I think it might be more this time around. So that's not a number I can conceive of. Can you? I can't. I mean, it's not just because I'm good at math. That is an inconceivable number. I didn't really get it until that guy did the rice video where he did the grains of rice, and then you saw the difference between like $1 million and $1 billion. Because it's somehow more than just 900 million. Like a billion is somehow more than that plus 100 million. It's confusing. But I'll just say this. 1 billion has 9 zeros and 1 trillion has 12. That's too many. That's too much for me. My brain goes blank. But it's too much monies is what I'm saying. So between January 2023 and April 2024, so that's, our time now, U.S. political campaigns collected around 8.6 billion for the 2024 House, the Senate, and presidential elections. That's a lot of money. But 65% of that money, about 5.6 billion, came from PACs. So you've heard me mention AIPAC quite a bit. AIPAC is a super PAC. So then I started to think, okay, what are the difference between PACs? Forgive me if you have zero interest in this, but dropping this information will make you sound hella smart to your friends. So the question I had was, did anybody's tax dollars, right? Did anybody's tax dollars pay for any of this? That's the question that I had. So I'll just say this, for the most part, no, right? There's a new legislation passed in 2014 that discontinued any tax money that was willingly collected towards the campaigns for the convention. So you didn't pay for that, because that's what I was mad about, because the IRS comes after me. I'm not even an American citizen, and they joyfully come after me. And I was like, did I pay for those balloons? Did I pay for their balloons? I didn't. Neither did you. So we're totally fine about that. So the U.S. presidential public funding program, it does, you basically, when you vote, which I don't know because I haven't had that immense privilege yet, there's an option where you can like throw $3 that way. And how that money is spent is actually very regimented because of, different legislation that was passed at different times. So in short, your tax dollars did not go towards spending for that balloon and confetti money, or to shout out Palestinians. And out of, let's say you were like, I want to contribute $3, right? It's capped. It's capped to a point. The real money comes from the super PACs. The real money comes from the super PACs. So there's 3 kinds of PACs. I'm going to make this so quick, but I'm just like, I love dropping a dime on somebody when they don't know the information. So traditional PACs, they're subject to spending limits. They're boring. We don't need to worry about that. Hybrid PACs are the combination between traditional PACs and super PACs. They don't matter anyway. It's the super PACs that matter the most, because super might sound like it's awesome, but it's actually not. So this is an independent expenditure-only committee. They can't donate directly to candidates or parties, but they can spend unlimited amounts on political advertising and other election-related activities. They can incentivize. They do absolutely nefarious things, and there's not a lot of oversight on these super PACs. I want to remind you, I'm bringing this up in part because collectively $25 million was spent by AIPAC to oust Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, 2 black people, 2 black representatives that were very vocal in criticism of Israel and the need to have an intervention to save Palestinian lives. They were very, very vocal about that. So I got to say, that wasn't my favorite kind of thing to learn, but it did feel important because I'm using a lot. They're political action committees, right? But as of right now, individual candidates have drawn over $2 billion, while party committees have raised around $929.9 million. My point is, right? Oh, by the way, $188.6 million went to the DNC. That's a lot of money. It's $188.6 million, right? We spent more than the Republican National Committee did. They spent $130 million. So as of right now, and I want to say this is around, maybe this goes up to June. I'll tell you where I got the sourcing in a minute, but the 2024 campaign spent approximately $3.9 billion of total funds raised. So I got this from, oh my God, this is so, I hear numbers and I zone out. I hope that's not you too. Do you also zone out when you get these numbers? Anyway, I got this from the Federal Election Commission's campaign finance data page, so you can go up there. That's the campaign finance data page if you're interested. I doubt that you are. But my point is, every time that they talk about not having money to change things as it is, it's a fucking lie. And there is no cap. There's absolutely no cap on political spending. Big money in politics is exactly why things are happening the way that they are. And it makes it so that our opinions, like those of the uncommitted network, right? Like the protesters, like leftists, like radicals, like artists and advocates and all the other cool people who think cool shit. It makes it so that our thoughts, our opinions, our values hold less weight and less, sway. And that needs to change. That needs to change. I'm furious. So we are going to get into the identities part of all of this, I think later on this week, so you can anticipate that. But I'm very, very upset. I will say this, though. I do stand by the fact that it doesn't behoove progress to run against a tsunami of momentum. That Kamala Harris has one is absolutely true. But is it our job to figure out how to use that to our advantage? Yes. The hardest thing in the world, let me tell you something about being an organizer, an activist, somebody who cares, whatever. The hardest thing in the world is to create momentum. It's the hardest thing in the world. In a best case scenario, we're riding it. We are riding it. So to all my little surfers, all my little tops, all my little power bottoms, and everybody in between, this is actually our moment to shine. And I think we got to figure out exactly what that looks like and exactly what that is, and we have to throw a lot of paint at the wall and keep going. But do we have to keep going? Absolutely. I will not be outdone. I will not be outdone by a Kappa. I will not be outdone by Biden's administration, and I will not be outdone by Kamala Harris's administration when it comes into power, which I am still anticipating and we still have to fight for. I'm not saying this is about voting or this or that. Nope. But one is so bad for everyone, like so unbelievably bad that any kind of life-saving efforts are going to be squashed immediately. And I have had one or two debates with people who said, well, this is what, we need to, this is, one is, they're the same. And I'm telling you, I have been there before. It happened in 2016 when people were like, nope, we don't need to vote. We don't need to do this for Hillary Clinton. Fuck Hillary Clinton. And the thing is, I don't disagree with any of these folks. I really don't. But they said it would teach America a lesson. It would teach Americans a lesson. It didn't. It just made our fight so much harder. This isn't about teaching people lessons. This is about living. This is about life and the quality of life. And the only true justice in this world is life. And our job is to take every kind of life-preserving and life-saving measures we possibly can. And I believe in us completely. I do. I absolutely do. Why? Because there's absolutely no reason why any of you should be here right now, but you are. And there's no reason why I am, but I am. And like that brilliant Vietnamese poet says, right? As long as we're alive, everything is possible. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to fight. So with that, why don't we hit that VM for the day?
Why is it so hard to let people be who they are now rather than banking on what we see their potential to be?
Okay, so I did get a little bit of clarification from this person regarding this question, because I do love a vague, I love a subtweet. I love a vague question. But I did want a little bit more context. So this person said, I'm not sure the cue makes sense, but I see so many relationships, both romantic and platonic, where people bank on someone's potential rather than who they show us they are. Okay, I feel this. This, one of the beautiful things about relationships, whether they're friendships or partnerships or whatever, is when you are around people who see how limitless you are, or who believe in you completely and believe in your potential. That is a wonderful thing, who push you on your own limitations. I like to believe that the best parts of me, the best parts inside of me, can only be accessed by others. I've learned that in my relationships with people. I owe a great debt to this world. I come from nothing, and the only reason I'm alive is because of the random acts of love and kindness that I have experienced, and the extra steps people are willing to take. So I'm a big believer in that, and I love relationships for that. And the best ones see that and help you reach that. But are there dynamics where we just kind of jump in and be like, nah, you got to change. You got to change the way you act. You got to change the way you look. I don't know why you walk too big. I don't know why you laugh like that. Yeah, that's shit. We don't need to be in those kinds of relationships. But I do think there are people who stay for potential. And I think there's something really beautiful, though, about loving somebody as they are with where they are, right? Like, we can always push people, but it's the pushing and the seeing has to be ignited by the person who wants to be pushed, and even if they don't necessarily know it at that time. So I have definitely had friends who have been in relationships with folks because of who they imagine the person to be versus who they was. So maybe that is something we can drop in 2020, in 2024. I love the idea of radical acceptance, but as a person who fundamentally believes in evolution and our need to evolve constantly so that we don't get stuck as we age, I'm like a both sides type thing. I'm just this, and this is one where I can be bisexual about it. This is not about politics. This is about the way we approach life. For the record, I do still think that Biden's best move, outside of literally enforcing this ceasefire, is to come out as a full-on lesbian. Just truly, you lost the mark on bisexual. It's just lesbian for you or bust. But I think it's people who can see you. That's the real beauty, is people who can see you and who love you and appreciate you as you are, and who are able to push you in meaningful ways that feel good for you. If you're starting to feel like somebody wants you to be an entirely different person, that's not love. That's somebody with an agenda, who maybe isn't always able to work on themselves. So that was a dope question. It was hard. Like, every time y'all give me a good question, I'm always like, damn, I wish I had a better answer. I'm going to have one when I'm washing my face at 2 a.m. Just being like, why didn't you say this? But brilliant question. I think it also is like meaningful in this moment where we're looking at, what did Kamala always say? Like, the context of what is. Like, bitch, shut up. Okay. Anyway. What a dope episode. I just want to thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. The show really is a labor of love. New episodes drop 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are streaming. I want to hear from you. Send me a voice note question or email me with a voice note question to jfktodayShow@gmail.com. Does it make a difference that I look at it myself? I do. Okay. So shout out to KR and the JFK team, and shout out to you, the listeners, who make this all possible. More to come. Peace.